Welcome to the Ripple of Change podcast, where we're working to unlearn learned helplessness. I'm Dr. Otten, and today's topic is Flourishing in Medicine with the Kern National Network. I'm thrilled to have two colleagues and friends here with me today, Jeff Fritz and Kimara Ellefson. I'm going to start the show with a Ripple Challenge question. But before we do that, you might get some rooster sounds, chicken sounds, and I think I maybe even heard a dog somewhere in the background. So we have some other guests that weren't anticipated, but that's okay. These are intended to be fun and lighthearted. So the Ripple Challenge question is going to go to Jeff first. And not only is he going to answer the question, but we're going to hear a little bit about him. Jeff, thank you for being here. What is your favorite tree?
First off, Todd, thank you for the invitation. It's a joy to be with you today. Favorite tree is a challenging one for me to answer because I really enjoy the rural environment in which I live. And thank you for inviting all of my other guests along with us today in terms of the chickens and the dogs and all that fun stuff. But one of the things I'd like to do is try to grow things that don't necessarily live in my climate here in northern central Wisconsin. And so my favorite tree is a plumeria tree. I actually have one growing in the basement, and it just a bloom here in Wisconsin with some TLC. So I really like many of the trees of the tropics, but my favorite one would be a plumeria.
Love it. And Jeff, just to be clear for the audience, your role with KNN is?
So I am the associate director for partnerships and learning. The fun part with that role, and to put some meaning behind all those words, is that I really have the opportunity to meet together with individuals and take a little time and explain the KNN framework for flourishing in medicine, and then explore with them how it could be applied in the settings in which they get the opportunity to practice medicine or experience medicine.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And Kamara, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. So I would say when you asked that question, Todd, I actually reflected back on a particular moment when I was in college. I was actually on a 3-week road trip, having just graduated college, which tells you a little bit about myself. My life motto is choose adventure, and I really love to be inspired by the places that I am, as well as work to inspire other people, which is actually what drew me to the KNN. But I can remember a particular train ride up and down Pikes Peak and all the aspen trees, and the wind was blowing, and the sun was glittering through those leaves, and I've never forgotten that moment. So I really do feel like the aspen tree is one of my favorite trees. They have this ability to grow in environments where you can't imagine that they would flourish. And so, as I think of my role here as the National Director for Strategy and Partnerships, I think of it as getting to amplify the amazing work that's being done throughout the healthcare ecosystem to really think about how we create cultures and environments of flourishing, all the way from thinking about who we're bringing into med school, through all of the interdisciplinary healthcare teams that are actually providing patient care, to thinking about the flourishing of patients. And sometimes I think we end up having to be like those aspen trees, sort of growing out of the side of a mountain. But there can be great beauty, I think, with the right nutrients. And my hope is that in my role of trying to advance the work of the KNN, that I get to help inspire and bring some of those appropriate nutrients so that we can flourish.
That is just an incredible answer. Mine's going to seem kind of lame at this point because I was going to pick the maple tree, part because I do too, and part because I'm staring out the window at all the beautiful colors. So it's probably subconscious. And I guess I like the two of you live relatively close to Canada, and so I used to have fond memories of hockey night in Canada with the flag going and Don Cherry talking and what have you. I digress. But this is interesting because I had picked the tree question before we had gotten on the air, not knowing that Kamara was going to have a tree behind her, and so it just fits so incredibly well. And actually, I think it lends to possibly the next question or topic for discussion, if you will. You know, when I got into medical school, it was this wonderful moment of joy and so desperately wanting to get in there to help other people. and that lasted for many many years for me. In a recent conversation, the word drudgery came up very early on for students in terms of it almost being this chore that they're going through, and that was difficult to hear for me. It was almost a little bit disheartening. And so when I think of the framework that KNN has built and trying to scale, if you will, I think it's incredible. Would either one of you maybe like to speak to the KNN framework?
Um, so just to provide some context to that space, I really have noticed, so I've had the opportunity to serve as a medical educator for the last 10 years, really involved with med students in those first 2 years of their experience. And also had that opportunity to serve on the admissions team. And just like you mentioned, Todd, a lot of the students come in really super excited. And many of our students still continue to what I would call flourish really well within the current system that we have. But I think there's also a lot of students who just quickly lose the curiosity of all the fun stuff that they're learning into the need to reach those performance metrics and the focus on, I need to get this done for step one, or now I'm done with step one and I need to get this moved into step two. And I deeply appreciate the need and the passion for developing what I call the knowing and doing skills amongst our students. Clearly, medical professionals and physicians in particular need to have excellences as it comes to knowledge and skills. But what I feel like we need to also amplify in that story is the process of who they're becoming as they acquire that round of knowledge and skills. And it always, to me, felt like a place of where it could be really exciting, although it might be a little strange because I actually do find the Krebs cycle somewhat enamoring. That explains probably why I have a PhD, and not everybody gets that same level of curiosity regarding those things. A fun story is I and Kimara met over my role as an anatomy teacher, actually in the anatomy lab. So I like that educational space, but I also recognize that the reason why I feel all med students started med school was to figure out what would be the career that would help them experience their wholeness of being and doing. And for us, that's the core definition of the KNN framework for flourishing. Flourishing is that opportunity to find your wholeness of being and doing, to realize your full potential, and to help others do the same. And I would hope that both our newly minted med students all the way through our physicians would find that space of that great joy of being in that opportunity of wholeness and being and doing.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. That was really incredible. I think what I might add to that is that as it relates to our framework, there are a few specific elements that we lean into that we really think are key and play sort of an interdependent role in that journey towards flourishing that Jeff so beautifully described. And we look at those as being character, caring, and practical wisdom. Character, we like to think of in leaning into sort of the multidimensional complexity of us as human beings and the idea that we can continue to shape and form over time. That really leans into that becoming piece that Jeff was talking about. And we think of that not only in that sort of med ed experience, but also throughout one's journey or a physician's journey or any healthcare professional or administrator within the healthcare ecosystem. It takes everyone to be able to, provide and bring these spaces of flourishing. And so character really helps us just look at, am I living aligned with my values? Am I showing up every day in a way that I really think best represents me? And how can I intentionally reflect on that? And then caring is really this idea of leaning into a sense of how do we care with instead of for. So maybe Todd, even thinking about that in a patient care setting, it could be that idea, right, of understanding what is it that my patient wants and needs and desires, what are their values, and then how do I make sure that my diagnosis plan, or excuse me, my treatment plan, is in alignment with that. And then how do we apply that to one another and not just our patients? Sometimes we're really good at thinking about that with our patients, but not so much with our colleagues or those on the team. And then finally, practical wisdom. I like to say that this is sort of that hashtag context matters, right? But we reflect on our lived experience. We look at that which we see in others, and we determine, how do I exercise one of the building blocks of my character in this particular situation so that we might have the best or wisest outcome for all involved.
There is so much gold in everything that the two of you just said. I had to refrain from trying to write everything down, but I was like, "Ah, I can go back and watch this later and get some cliff notes too." It one of the things that really resonated with me there was one of the things you had said, Kamara, that not everything is cookie cutter when we're talking about medicine, particularly with diagnoses and subsequent treatment plans. My mind immediately went back to a case I had of a gentleman who was in his 90s. I had just started at the clinic and we had diagnosed him with metastatic pancreatic cancer. And I was thinking about the options and I laid them all out there for him, as to what direction he could take and so on and so forth. And the diagnosis was obviously, or excuse me, prognosis was obviously very poor. And he said to me, he said, "Dr. Otten, what would you do?" And I said I would spend time with my family. And he did. And I don't want to start crying, but it was a beautiful last 3 months as opposed to undertaking a lot of treatment that ultimately might have prolonged his life to a small percentage, if you will. But he didn't choose that path, and that was an amazing moment, and I will forever remember that as tears were streaming down both of our faces. Um, and to me, in that moment with him, we were flourishing, um, despite the really terrible diagnosis that I had just given him. Wow, I wasn't expecting to talk about that that today, but it seemed to fit, and I think it speaks to medicine as this just palette of all kinds of beautiful colors and shades of gray and what have you. And if we embrace that, it's just it's amazing to go to work when that's happening. Um, I'd like to talk, and maybe we'll start with you here, Kamara, about some of the things that are exciting with KNN, or some of the things that are upcoming, opportunity, hope, etc. I'm intentionally leaving this somewhat open ended and vague, so that you can take it in whatever direction you so choose.
Okay, sounds great. Well, Todd, first of all, thanks for sharing that really powerful story. And I agree with you about the flourishing. We lean into the work of Tyler Vanderveel of the Harvard Human Flourishing Program, and one of the pathways that he would suggest, that along which we will find flourishing, is that of family. So when you gave that answer of, I would spend time with my family, right? It's that sense of leaning into that which we find deeply meaningful. And I am excited about the fact that the canon is allowing places and spaces, Todd, for us to really wrestle with that complexity that you talked about. I think there can be a tendency to try to maybe think of things in a simpler way. And I think what both Jeff and I might suggest to you today is there aren't 7 steps to flourishing, that if everybody follows, this is where it'll be, but rather that it is this beautiful, complex sort of kaleidoscope of where each of us can bring our lived experience to think about pathways of flourishing for ourselves as well as for others. So, I think what I'm excited about is the members of the movement that are teaching us and showing us and demonstrating in their work and the places that they are embedded in their spheres of influence, how an aim of flourishing is really beginning to transform not only their own personal practice and the way that they are showing up, but beginning to transform the spheres of influence. Todd, we just recently had our third annual PNN conference in Fort Lauderdale, and we had over 230 people and over 75 unique institutions represented. And those numbers to me are powerful because it means that people, I think, are finding some hope, some renewal in a system that has for a while now felt like it's been producing languishing. And so I'm excited about what we are able to do together. The KNN has very intentionally chosen to be a movement, which means that it's really the people of the movement that have an opportunity to teach where transformation needs to occur, how it can occur, and what is necessary to bring flourishing into the healthcare ecosystem. So that's probably what I'm most excited about. And in my role, I get to hang out at a bunch of different medical schools across the country. And I've been doing that. Last week, I was at a number of our partner sites on the West Coast. And really seeing the way that it is transforming is one of the things that excites me. So, Jeff?
One of the great things about the KNN is understanding our history began with med schools and med students and physicians. And as Kimara mentioned with the KNN conference, we've now expanded our reach beyond that space as well. So I just had a conversation today with the PA program. I've had a number of conversations with folks who across the healthcare system in terms of the IPE program, so that's interprofessional education, that are looking for ways to also expand this movement into the nursing aspects of healthcare, the pharmacy aspects, and really looking at the care team in its total dimensions, exploring what flourishing looks like in those spaces. So I would add into the space of the joys of co-partnering and co-journeying with individuals to figure out what that looks like is that, from areas of public health throughout the other aspects of really the healthcare ecosystem, there's been a lot of excitement for this. So to me, it feels like it's an opportune time by which the entirety of healthcare is trying to, in a minimum, rediscover that joy and awe that you, Todd, mentioned just in a little bit of that patient care experience that you shared with your 90-year-old patient. You entered into a moment of shared awe and shared experience. And I feel like that feeling is consistent across the healthcare ecosystem. So I'm really excited that there's sort of uptake of this concept of both character, caring, practical wisdom, and their promotion of flourishing across those individuals who we see in the patient care space.
This is wonderful. And I was in doing my due diligence to prepare for this. I obviously was on the KNN website and was reading through things. And one of the pieces and really words, if you will, that caught my attention was the word bridges. I that really just grabbed me. And because I think of the existing infrastructure in many places in this country within healthcare delivery, things are very siloed. And we need to get away from that. We need many, many bridges to improve patient care delivery and really to piggyback on that, flourishing, if you will. So one of the things do a lot of work with Medicine Forward, and we're thrilled to be working with KNN for an open space that's coming up in November of 2024 in New York City at the 7th annual Burnout Symposium. And I wrote down the title because I didn't want to screw it up. So bear with me as I look down. Restoring and Nurturing the Human Connection in Healthcare. And so we're thrilled to have that opportunity to work with KNN and specifically Jeff at that symposium. So having said that, let's jump into maybe some more action steps or actionable items that the listener can take away that either KNN is working on or aspiring to, whether it's bridges or work pending with healthcare systems or mobilizing character. Again, I don't like to, we can do broad strokes or we can get very granular. I think either way is good. Kimara, I see a big smile on your face, so we'll start with you, I suppose.
That sounds great. Jeff, maybe I'll start by highlighting some of the bridging stuff if you want to talk about some of the other areas. So Todd, I really appreciate the fact that you brought up bridging. Dr. Cheryl Marana is the founding director of the KNN, along with as Jeff was suggesting, sort of those original 7 founding member schools. And one of the things that was very interesting as we began to work with medical schools was in the current environment, there was a sense that, as you said, Todd, we're lacking bridges, right? There's a lot of constituencies and constituent camps, whether it's administration and providers or faculty and students or whatever it may be. And this idea that no matter what constituency you might find yourself in, you weren't sure if you had the freedom to really express your thoughts or your views, or we weren't learning how to sort of talk and connect with one another across that. And so Cheryl was really looking at the work of Putnam, where he talks about, sort of breaking and bonding and bridging, and seeing so much more breaking in the healthcare ecosystem and in medical education, and thinking about where could be this place for bridging that hopefully then would lead us to bonding. And so it was within that we have really launched bridging learning communities, bridge builders program. And then we have 9 medical schools across the country that are a part of a demonstration project with us, thanks to the Macy project that is allowing us to really put into practice what does it mean for us to create bridges. How do we bring a place of coming together across differences? And this is really something that we feel very strongly about in the KNN. And so while we have those 9 member schools working on some very specific sorts of projects, we also do have a Bridge Builders learning community and a Bridge Builders learning program that people who would be interested in being bridge builders within their institution would have an opportunity to come to learn and to think about applying these practices, with us really believing that as we come together across differences, that we have an opportunity to again increase flourishing within our systems that we're a part of. And this doesn't mean that we're taking on different beliefs. It means we learn how to stop and listen and be curious about that which other people feel, and I think really work to find common ground even across those differences. Jeff, you want to talk about some of the other programs and things that are going on in the KNN?
I would be delighted. And, one of the really exciting places that both Kimara and I get to work, as well as others with the KNN team, is we really look for groups and organizations that we can partner with who are interested in taking the framework and seeing how the framework might actually serve as that North Star to guide systems change. And so, for example, we have a pathway where folks could become a change maker group and work with us in the influence that they have as a group, as well as opportunities for organizations to pursue a catalyst organization path where they would really co-partner with us and look for ways in which they could take the KNN framework. And one of the ways I like to have people think about this is there's already a lot of busy stuff to do within the healthcare space. And this isn't about adding one more thing to do, but this is about how can you repurpose the things you're already doing to come at that through a promotion of human flourishing lens. So what does it look like through that lens to develop character and talk about the integration of character development into those spaces? What does it look like to begin to ask ourselves, what does it mean to care with? And how can we think about the systemic as well as the individual initiatives that can promote and improve both the expressions of character as well as that deep opportunity to care? All of that being wrapped up with the complexity that we talked about and recovering that awe in the process of making those wise decisions and doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons, so that we can get to those spaces. I think just to make things a little more granular, one of the things that I remain most excited about is sort of the KNN Learner Network, which is for me, a really fun way in which both in the medical student experience and in the residency experience, we can support both leadership development and the KNN framework and ask the individuals who are going through those environments, how does the framework impact you on a day-to-day basis, and give them those opportunities to share through our Becoming series and other opportunities. Even at the recent KNN conference, we had some residents share some co-produced poetry to describe their experience and how the framework integrates within that space. So that excitement is mostly, from my perspective, driven by watching the autonomy and by which those individuals sort of move into that space of being and becoming.
This is just amazing. The majority of my career, I have loved what I've done, seeing patients, and I would put it into that in the book. I talk about the office utopia, and so I would say that there was a good percentage of time that I was flourishing. However, I possibly also set fire to some bridges in some certain instances as I was leaving, and probably appropriately so. I'll just get that disclaimer out there now. I felt like I needed to say that. I couldn't resist. Anyways, this has been incredible. I do want to offer you both the opportunity for two things as we sort of near our 30-minute time window, if you will. The first is one imparting thought on anything you'd like, and also how can the audience not only reach you, but get in contact with Kern National Network if they're interested in learning more and or participating, etc. And Jeff, I think you looked up first, so I'm going to go to you. I'm going to go to you.
Well, so we do have a website by which it's an easy way to just say, I'd like to get more information. And we would very quickly turn that around, most likely into a conversation with me, not much different than today. And Kimara would join as well, as might others from the program office team. And clearly through our website and our social media venues, you have opportunities to get to not only know more about what the KNN is, but ask some specific questions and maybe follow up and say, I'd like to know more about that bridging opportunity. How could I learn more about those spaces? One of the things we didn't get the chance to talk about is we're excited about the convenings that the KNN puts together. We do have a health systems convening that we're trying to really get our hands around on how do we get health systems to join us in this space. We're trying to get that all put together to have that convening happen in May of 2025. Trying to keep my year straight. Some days I feel like I'm living in the past, present, and future all at the same time. Kimara, are there other things that you'd like to add as well to that question?
Yeah, sure. Oh, I'm sorry, Jeff. Yeah, so the parting thought that I might leave Todd would be that while concepts like caring, character, practicalism, and flourishing can feel somewhat maybe ethereal or abstract. I mean, many of these things go all the way back to the early philosophers. We really at the KNN are interested in partnering with and working with people who would like to think about how do we make this actionable and contemporary for us today. And so, as Jeff said, I think going out to the website and finding those places and spaces where you could express interest. There are ways for individuals to get involved. There are ways for teams or groups to say, hey, we're really interested in learning more. Or maybe you're already at a place where you're doing work that you think would be really in alignment with this. We would love to have you come teach us. The movement is really a place for individuals to share with one another. And we look at it from a program office perspective, where Jeff and I have the honor of working, as our role is to just really amplify this great work and then connect people so that together we might catalyze change. So I would say, if you're an individual, if you're a team, if you're a leader within an organization for which this sounds interesting, there's a place for everyone in the KNN. And we'd love to hear from you and really have an opportunity to direct you. Or maybe you're a learner today listening. As Jeff mentioned, we have 30 learner chapters across the country in the UME space. We're launching some really exciting things in the GMA space. So maybe, Todd, I would just say there's a place for everyone that would be interested in this work, whether you fully grasp the concepts or you're just curious and interested. And we'd love to hear from you and figure out the best place to really get you rooted in.
This is beautiful. And I'll reiterate that Jeff and I will be at the Burnout Symposium soon. So that'd be another great way to meet, make some additional connections, what have you. I always forget to do this, so I'm getting better at this. If you're interested in Ripple of Change that I co-authored with one of my patients, rippleofchange.us. And as always, what positive ripple of change will you create today?
Grab your copy today. Ripple of Change is available in hard, soft, and ebook formats. More information at www.ourquadrupleaim.com. Thanks for listening, and let's turn ripples into waves of lasting change. Stay tuned to this podcast as we search for examples of our quadruple aim.